However, you'd still have to manually go to every client computer out there and actually go to it and double click on this to install it. That's not the most ideal way of doing it. Really, the most ideal way of doing it is to deploy the printer itself. If you click on deployed printers, I currently have no deployed printers. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the printers. There it is. And actually, I'm just going to right click on it, the printer that I want to deploy, and choose deploy with group policy. Now, group policy is going to be in some future lessons. It's going to be basically manipulating the settings that are available on computers and basically making changes to computers based on either the whole entire domain or organizational units that we will set up here as well in the future ones. You don't have to worry about that right now. Just go ahead and click on deploy with group policy, and you can see this is the printer, the front office printer, and I've got some options. Now, the group policy object, if you're not familiar with it, there is a group policy object called default domain policy, and I'm going to go ahead and choose browse. There it is, the default domain policy. This applies to every computer that is a member of the domain, and this is kind of like the catch-all for everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and select that and hit OK, and I've got the option now here between user and machine itself. We can actually apply this to every user on our network, and or we could also apply it to the machines. And I'm going to go ahead and actually apply it to both and hit add. This will apply it so no matter if whoever the user is that logs in or if anybody else logs on the computer on that particular machine that's on our domain, it'll be set up for both of those. So that's kind of like a safe way of doing it, having them both on there for this particular application. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. And you'll see that it said it was the deployment or removal operation had succeeded. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And what you're going to notice is nothing different changes here. However, if I click on deployed printers, you can see there it is. The front office printer has been deployed. This is the name of the server that it's located on. And it's being applied both to the users and the computers that are on the domain itself. So now we actually need to test this. And so let's go ahead and test this by switching over to a client, a Windows 7 computer that's on my domain. Now that I've got my client logged on here, there are a couple ways of doing this. Now, if you had the client already logged in, you may not have the settings take effect right away. And that's because sometimes the group policy may take a while. Sometimes a restart or log off and log back in will do that. There's a command I can type in just to make sure it's done, and it's just gp update. That's the group policy update. If I hit enter, it's going to go through and check to see if there's been any group policy settings from our server that need to apply to this particular client machine. And it'll only take a moment here. After the group policy takes effect, you're going to see it just automatically disappear. And so now what I've got is, if I go to Start, Devices and Printers, you should be able to see that actual printer show up. And there it is, the printer showed up. Here are some possible problems. If I have a 64-bit server and the client is a 32-bit operating system, you may not see it show up just because it only shows up if everything works. And so the drivers have to be the same. 32-bit drivers and 64-bit drivers differ. So that needs to be something that's the same. So keep that in mind as well. Now, if I want to, I can actually go to the shared folder and the shared printers of the actual server itself and see that. If I click on / srv-1, which is the name of my server, and I hit enter, you're going to see these are the items that were shared on my server. The printer was one of those things that were shared. If you want to manually set it up, let's say this was a 32-bit operating system and it did not automatically show up through the group policy, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to double click on the actual printer itself, and then it will use the drivers on the local machine rather than the 64-bit. So the group policy itself would not work. The only thing I can do to make that work is I'm going to have to modify the drivers on the actual server to be both 32-bit and 64-bit in order for something like that to work. So let's go ahead and go back to the server itself. And so now that I have the server pulled up, I want to make sure I have printer selected. If you want to install the 32-bit drivers, or if you have a 32-bit and you want the 64-bit drivers, you're going to actually need to have the drivers on a disk or a downloaded file. But I'll show you where that's located at. If you click on your front office printer or the printer you have installed, you can right click on it and go to Properties. There are a couple different options we can configure with this particular computer, the preferences and so forth. But if I click on Sharing, you'll see here that I have the additional drivers. If I click on that, I can choose to install the 86-bit, which is the x86, which is the 32-bit driver. So you can see 64-bit have already been installed. So I've got that option to look for those drivers and try to work with both 32 and 64-bit clients on there as well. You're going to notice a couple other things that are in here. Let's see, if I go to the advanced, you can actually set when this printer is going to be available from certain time periods as well. If you installed the wrong driver on the printer, you could always go through and find the new printer driver for it if you found a better one or a more up-to-date one. So these are some of the settings that are available for this particular printer. I'm going to go ahead and close out of this now. And this concludes the video on using the printer and document services to turn a server into a print server on Windows Server 2008.